Hello everyone, my name is Amanda and welcome back to another video of the Planty Mandy. Alright, so this is the second part of my lights and plants video. So if you watched last week's video, I know it was a heavier video because there's a lot of like science and math and all that stuff, but it is actually a very important foundation to set you up for this coming video, because we're going to be using a lot of those terminology and a lot of those foundation to talk about grow lights today, which is one of your most requested topics. So yeah, so if you have not watched last week's video, I highly recommend to go back and just watch it, because it's gonna help you to understand this video about artificial lighting, aka grow lights, a lot more. So let's get started. Okay, one of the most important things that we talked about in last week's video was how to measure the light intensity, aka how strong your light is. So how strong your light is, or light intensity, it's actually composed of 4 different factors. So the first one is the PPFD, the photosynthetic coated photons flux density. So basically it's measure how many photons, right? The tiny light particles, you can imagine them as like tiny light particles hitting the surface of your leaf within a square meters of area per second as a fixed distance, right? So that's what PPFD is. Basically, it's measure how dense, like the light density, right? The second factors we talked about was photoperiod, like how long your plant is actually being exposed to that light. And the third one we talked about was the distance. So obviously, the farther the distance the light is from your plants, you will receive less photons because it's kind of dispersed in the middle, right? And the closer you put your lights to your plants, the photon density is going to be a lot more. And last but not least is how much of an area the single light source is covered. The larger the area, obviously, again, the photons are going to disperse and each plant is going to get less photons. And on the contrary, if it's a smaller area, the photons will be more concentrated and each plant will get more photons. So those are the 4 factors that we discussed last week in last video in terms of how do you measure light's intensity. So this exact formula can be actually used when you talk about how strong your grow light is. So today we're just going to basically apply, these 4 factors into artificial lighting. So we know that how do we pick, the grow light that would be best suit your plants. Or if you already have a certain grow lights, you can actually, kind of like look at it and check the numbers to see if this is actually strong enough for your plants. So we're going to talk about all that stuff. So the first factor we're going to talk about is the PPFD. Again, the photosynthetic coated photons flux density, how dense your light is, how many of those photons, the light particles, actually hitting your plant surface. So unfortunately, a lot of time, PPFD or PPF is not listed on the grow lights labels. Most of the time you'll see lux or you'll see lumen. Sometimes you'll see foot candle. You also see watt and kelvin. So those are the common measurements units you'll see on the labels of your grow lights. So we talk about lux, we talk about lumen, we talk about foot candles last week. So those are the measurements of the brightness of the lights to human eyes. So it literally means nothing to the plants, unfortunately. So I think last week we talked about the example of like how, green lights, right, appear to be the brightest to human eyes. However, for plants, green light is actually the least efficient spectrum to be used for photosynthesis. On the contrary, the blue and the red light, it's, they appear to be the dimmest to human eyes. However, they are actually the most efficient spectrum for the lights for the plants to use for photosynthesis. So you can kind of see like the discrepancy here, between like, how the plants see lights and how we as humans see light. And that's why foot candle, lux, and lumens, even though it means something to us, it may not mean a lot to the plants. And unfortunately, that's the mainstream ways for grow lights to be labeled, right? But don't worry, through the magic of math, in a little bit, I'll show you how to convert them into useful PPFD, right? So the other labels or the other measurements you always see is watt, right? So watt, in my opinion, means even less to the plant, just because it's basically just measure energy efficiency, right? How expensive it is for you to use that light, because that light is actually converting the electricity that you're paying for into light, and also other byproducts like heat, right, that you may lose, right? So watt, it's just that, right? And last but not least, you also see Kelvin. So this one, I would say, unlike lux and lumens, actually means a little bit more to the plant, right? So Kelvin is a temperature measurement unit, right? Essentially, when you apply that to grow light, it is a representation of color temperature. So remember last week we talked about PAR, right? Photosynthetic activation, which is, the light spectrum, the purple, the blue, the red, the orange, the basically the rainbow color that it's visible to human eyes that the plants actually can use for photosynthesis, right? So Kelvin actually tell you something about that. So for Kelvin, it can measure from about 2000 K to 6400 K. So the lower the K, the lower the Kelvin is, the light would contain more of a warmer temperature. So that would be closer to like the red or the orange spectrum, on the PAR meter, on the PAR, value. However, if you move towards the other end, which is like a higher K, like, 5000 to 6400 K, so that would represent a cooler or colder color temperature. So if you look at the PAR again, it's going to be representing more like the blue spectrum, all right? So what does the blue and the red mean for the plant? So remember last time when we talked about PAR, we also talked about like how plants use different color spectrum, right? So for the blue spectrum, right, the blue light, the plants actually use it more efficiently or effectively for vegetative growth. So, blue spectrum will help the plants to grow more foliage, will help the plants to develop like stems, petioles, and all that vegetative growth, right? So that would be the blue spectrum, which is the 5000 to 6400 K, measurements for color temperature. And on the other hand, the lower Kelvin, which is like about 3000 K, would be the warmer temperature, which is like red, right? So, and red spectrum, it's actually really helpful for the plants to fruit and flower, right? So when you get a grow light, right, if you really want the grow light to help your plant to just like grow a lot of foliage, like a lot of us grow a lot of like, foliage plants such as aroids or like, peperomia, right? We mainly grow them for the leaves. So you may want to focus on a higher color temperature, like a higher Kelvin, again, like 5000 to 6400 K would be, the one that you want to choose. However, if you are looking to fruit and flower your plant, because some of us grow like, indoor, like cherry tomato, or sometimes we want our Hoyas to really flower, you can focus on more the lower K, like the 3000, closer to the 3000 K color temperature, so that may help your plant to flower and fruit more. So yeah, so that would be like what Kelvin represent in terms of what is helpful or what is meaningful for your plants. So now that we understand lux, lumens, we understand watt, we understand Kelvin, we know that, in terms of light density, like how many photons are hitting your plant leaf, which actually means something for the plant, doesn't really represent with those units. So what we have to do as plant parent, if we want to really understand if the light is dense enough for our plants, we'll have to convert, those lux, lumens, or whatever into more useful units such as PPFD, right? So, yes, there's a way to convert it. I'm going to keep it like super simple and just give you one single numbers. And that number is 0.0135. All right. So that's basically it's a conversion factor strictly applied to cooler temperature, like white fluorescent, light or lamps when you want to convert lux, right? Remember we talked about lux into PPFD. Right? So what you have to do when you get a grow light, let's say you get a grow light that say, oh, it's 10,000 lux, right? And again, it's bright, but it doesn't really mean anything to the plants, right? So if you want to convert the lux, right, lux units into the PPFD units, which is you remember, the UMO, the micromole per square meter per second at a specific distance, all right? So you want to convert the lux into PPFD, then you will just have to multiply the lux with the conversion factor that I just provide you, right? So let's use the same example. So we have a grow light that label 10,000 lux, right? And we want to know how many UMO per square meter per second, aka PPFD, is the light is actually providing the plant. So all you need to do is you're gonna put 10,000 lux times 0.0135. And when you do that multiplication, you'll get the answer of 135 UMO per square meter per second. So basically that light is giving you 135 micromoles of photons within 1 square meter of area per second at the specific distance that we are measuring the light. So that's basically how these conversion factors work. So there's many different conversion factors you can use, because for example, if you want to measure sunlight, convert sunlight into PPFD, you have to use a different conversion factor. If you want to convert like a high pressure sodium lamp, or something like that, like the more like professional horticulture grade, light, it will be a different conversion factor. But since most of us are indoor hobbyist grower, I'll just focus on, what we use the most, which is like the cool color LED light. So that's basically a simplification of how do you convert lux, right, into more useful units for the plants such as PPFD. So I know what you're thinking, all right? Now you're like, well, yeah, but what is 135 UMO per square meter per second means? Does it mean it's a lot of light? Does it mean it's very low light? What does it mean? All right, so worry not. This is my next point. So I'm just gonna give you a really brief reference point, all right? So when we talk about low lights, right? Low lights, we are talking about 10 to 60 PPFD. Right, 10 to 60 UMO per square meter per second. So that would be considered low light. So if you apply it to like lateral lights, right, because it's easier to visualize, right? So it will be more like a Lofton exposure. Like if you have a Lofton window, yeah, those will be about like 10 to 60 UMO per square meter per second. It's considered a really low light area, right? And then when you go up to 50 to 200 UMO per square meter per second, it can be considered as medium light. So that would be a little bit like approximately equivalent to your eastern or western exposure, windows, if you do have one. Right? So for highlights, we are talking about 200 plus PPFD or 200 plus UMO per square meters per second, right? So that would be more your southern exposure, like, where you put your succulent, the plant that can tolerate a lot more sun. And last but not least, when we are talking about 1,000 to 3,000 UMO per square meter per second, we are talking about full sun, outdoor. Like you go out, it's a sunny day. Yeah, that's about 1,000 to 3,000 UMO per square meters per second. So that's a tongue twister. So yeah, so that would be just a brief like reference point, right? So let's go back to our example, right? We calculate like, okay, you bought a grow light with 10,000 lux, you convert it, and you find out it's 135 UMO per square meter per second at a specific distance. And then you refer it to the reference point that we just talked about, right? How strong the light is. So you will find out that 135 UMO per square meters per second, it's actually fall under the medium light range. So remember, medium is like 50 to 200. So 135, it's like, okay, it's like on like towards the higher range, of the medium light. So it's closer to your eastern or western exposure. So you will know in your head, you can kind of visualize now, with this like really abstract number, you can actually visualize how strong your light actually is. And from there, you can determine what plants or how many plants you want to put under that particular grow light. So the second factors we talked about last week was photoperiod, right? How long you leave your lights on. So I'm gonna keep this one really simple, all right? So yes, we can also, calculate, per hour, like how many photons is hitting your leaves, like, per hour, per day or something like that. But I'm gonna keep this one really simple. Obviously, the longer you keep your grow lights on, the more photons your plant's gonna be receiving, right? Remember last time, even though, different plants, different genus of plants or different species of plant would prefer different photoperiod, or even with the same genus or the same species, they may prefer different photoperiod, based on, are they growing leaves now or they are flowering or fruiting now, right? However, most horticulturists would agree that if you want your plants to grow at a reasonable speed, we're just gonna keep the photoperiods to 10 hours minimum. So AKA, just leave your grow lights on 10 hours minimum. So to give you a reference, I personally leave my grow lights on for about 12 hours. I know some people leave it on to like 16 hours. But yeah, like I said, minimum, would be 10 hours. All right, so next we're gonna talk about the third and the fourth factors together, because I want to show you an example to demonstrate how these two factors is actually affecting your light intensity, right? So remember the third one we talked about was the distance between, the light and your plants. Obviously, the further the light is, more photons or more like light's gonna be dispersed, and the less amount of light will be received by your plants. And if you put it really close, right, then more photons will be actually dropping on the plant, right? So generally speaking, when the photons or when the light's being emitted from the grow lights, you lose about 20% in the middle. So that could be heat, that could be, other byproduct, or just, the dispersion. So you lose about 20% of light, right? So that would be how the distance affects how many photons your plant is actually getting. And the fourth factor we talked about was how big of an area, the lights have to cover. So the bigger the area, right, the fixed amount of photons that emitted from that grow lights would have to disperse to more plants, and resulting in less photons per plant, right? And if the area is smaller, obviously, all the plants within the areas will get more photons, more light. So that's basically how the distance and also the covered area works. So now, I want to use this example to demonstrate like how these two factors can, really like decrease your intensity of the lights, with the distance and the larger cover area, right? So we're gonna use the same example that's used earlier, just to make it simple. So remember we got a 10,000 lux grow lights, right? And then we multiply that with our conversion factor strictly applied to cooler fluorescent lights, which is 0.0135. And then we find out that that's particular grow lights at that particular distance from the plants, right, give us about 135 UMO per square meter per second, right? So now we know that, okay, we have that 135 UMO per square meter per second at that particular distance. So now we're gonna apply the third and the fourth factors into the equation to see how that actually affects our quality of the light or intensity of the light. Right, so let's say I have a 5 by 5 area that I want to use this grow lights for, right? So 5 by 5, 5 times 5 is 25 square feet, right? But because UMO, remember, PPFD, the unit is in square meter. So we have to, just do some math and convert it into square meter. So 25 square feet is equivalent to about 2.32 square meters. All right, I know, bear with me. All right, so we know that now that 10,000 lux lights, that it's emitting 135 UMO per square meter per second of photons, are covering 2.32 square meters of area, right? So now we're gonna bring the distance into the equation, right? So remember we talked about, like, generally speaking, we lose about 20% of the lights, during the process of, like, the lights coming from the grow lights and hit the canopy. We lose about 20% in the middle. So we're gonna, in order to demonstrate that, we're gonna multiply the 135 UMO of photons by 0.8, which means that we lost the 20%. So it's actually left us with 108 UMO per square meter per second. So you see, like, just by the distance, like just the light's loss, what it lose about, I don't know, 20 like UMO from there, right? So now we're gonna add the area factors into the equation, right? So now you have 108 UMO per square meter per second. And then you're covering a 2.32 square meters of area. So 108 divided by 2.32 is 46, right? So basically, even though your grow lights start with 185 UMO per square meter per second at a specific distance, after you consider or you add in the factors of, the surface area the light is going to cover and the distance between the light and the plants, you only left with about 46, right, UMO per square meter per second. And when you go back to the reference chart that we talk about, right, high light, low light, medium light, 46 is actually in the low lights area, right? So you may start with 135, which is, you remember, it's like the higher spectrum of the medium light. But because of the distance and also the area, now you only have low lights. So that would be the stuff that we actually have to consider as plant parent, because we may think that, oh wow, I got the strongest grow light, yay, but we are using that one grow lights for like many plants or big area, and we put the lights like really high up, for whatever reason, then we actually really degrades the intensity and the quality of the lights. I know. I know it's a lot of again, I know it's a lot of math. I know it's a lot of numbers, a lot of, effort that you may have to put in to understand it. And trust me, like, I spend so much time on these two videos, just to make sure that I understand this so I can explain it to you, right? And also trying to like put it in like as simple as possible format for you to understand. So again, it is a little bit more like a little bit heavier. However, it's necessary because, as we mentioned before, human eyes see lights very differently than plants, right? And also our eyes are very deceptive and subjective, right? Because, for example, if we walk out to the outdoor from an indoor space, right, we feel like the light is super bright, right? Or like, if we just woke up, and we open our eyes and we feel like everything is too bright, right? So that's why human eyes sometimes are unreliable. And in order for us to really figure out like, what caused our plants to not growing as much as we wanted to, we'll have to look at it in a more objective and scientific way, which is through numbers. I don't like math, just so you know, but I found them extremely helpful, and they are they make a lot of sense to me, and that's why I spend a little bit more time you know, to demonstrate that for you. And I just want to give that to you because I'm gonna give you more map in a little bit when we actually look at some real life grow light examples. Some of them I actually personally use, you know, to, you know, really help you to bring this formula or this theory into your everyday use when you're choosing your grow lights. So next we're gonna talk about 3 different grow lights that I found, and one of them I personally use and I love it. So yeah, so like I mentioned before, a lot of the grow lights, you know, they don't really have the PPFD or PPF labels on the box, but I did notice that in the past 2 or 3 years that I've been starting using grow lights and stuff, more and more of them actually incorporate the PPF measurement onto their label, which is awesome because, you know, we don't have to do the math. It's already on there, right? So the first grow lights I want to talk to you about, it's Miracle LED grow light. So this is the one that I actually use. I actually have I have 5 of them hanging, right? So it's a grow light bulb. So it's very easy. You just have to like screw it into like a fixture, and that's it. And then you turn it on and that's it, right? So the good thing also about this grow lights bulb that you know, the reason I love it so much is because it actually gives you the UMO per square meter per second already. So on the box, it said that this light emit 1900 UMO per square meter per second, right? So if you go back to our reference chart, 1900 is actually full sun, right? It's closer to full sun, right? Just by the PPFD itself, you know. However, you have to consider like, you know, how long you leave it on, the cover area and distance, right? All the stuff that we just talked about, right? But yeah, 1900 UMO per square meter per second, it's really good, and that's why I like it. And it actually reflects on my plants too, because my plants are just, you know, loving it, right? And also on the box, on the label, it's actually say the Kelvin it's 5000 K. So remember, right, when we say about Kelvin, the color temperature, 5000 is closer to the cooler daylight color, like the blue, you know, spectrum. So it's actually promoting more vegetative growth, and it's also reflect on my plants because my plants is growing vegetatively, like more leaves and more stem and more petioles and stuff like that. So yeah, so the Miracle LED is actually one of my most favorite grow lights in the market. And it's also cheap. Well, I mean, it's cheapest, cheap-ish. So it's about, I think it's about $20 or something like that. No more than 30, like 20 to 30 bucks. So yeah, so, you know, in comparison to some other grow lights that you can find, that I will be discussing later. This one, when you look at the quality of the lights, the UMO, the Kelvin, right, all the stuff, when you balance it out, it's actually a really, really good grow light. So that's why I highly recommend it. The only thing is, it does emit some heat. I can feel the warmth of it. Yeah, so you may want to, like, you know, watch out for that. So the second one I want to discuss with you is the Oleandro LED grow light. So I personally have not used this one, but I did some research on it, and this guy does have a pretty good review from, you know, a lot of people. So I want to talk about it. So I think this is more like, you know, like the one with like a flat surface, and they have a lot of like tiny, you know, light bulbs in there. So the reason I choose this one is because it's also give you the UMO actually for the light itself, so you don't have to calculate it from lux or whatever, right? And the other really great thing about this lights too is on the labels or disclosures is actually show you how different distance of this particular light would affect the UMO. So for example, when the light is, you know, at a farther distance, like 18 to 24 inches, right? It will emit about 113 like UMO per square meters per second of photons will hit your plants. And then when you shorten the distance to about 14 inches, the numbers go up to about 169 UMO. right? And then when you shorten the distance even more to 8 to 12 inches, the UMO going to be 336. And last but not least, right, when you shorten it to about 6 inches, the UMO become 393. So you can see like this is, I also picked this one because it's a good example to demonstrate like how the UMO change when you shorten the distance. So remember, again, go back to the reference chart, right? So when it is at like 18 to 24 inches, 113 UMO, it is considered medium light, right? However, when you go down to the 6 inches distance, like the really short distance, it's go up to 393 UMO, which actually give you a highlight, more like a southern exposure distance. So, this is actually a really good disclosures for us plants parent to understand that how can we play around with the distance, to increase or decrease the light intensity. So it is not only like, it is not only like one fixed distance, right? But, we have different plants. Like, for example, my Syngonium elbow, it probably needs a little bit less light than my Hoyas, for example, right? So, for my Syngonium elbow, I may keep it at about like, 8 to 12 inches, right? Or sometimes even like 14 inches is fine. However, for my Hoya, right, especially I'm trying to get it to flower, I may put it to like maybe like 10 inches or even 8 inches to get that PPFD up. So that is a very good disclosures for us plant parents. And the price of this light, last time I looked up, it's about $32. So it's not super cheap, but it's also not expensive at all. Especially again, when I compare, this with the Lex Grow lights. Okay, so we talk about the Miracle LED, right, which is about $20, and then we talk about the Angel LED, which is about $32. So they are not like super cheap, but they are like, somewhat affordable, especially in comparison to some other grow lights, right? So although they're cheap, but they don't look so pretty, I should put it that way, unless you're willing to DIY. Like I know people who put like, with drill hole at the terracotta pot and then put it as like a shade for their grow light bulb, which is awesome. I don't do that because I'm lazy and also I don't care. As long as they're functional, like I'm happy with them, right? But if you are unlike me, you want your grow lights to look nice, like you want your grow lights to look like a piece of furniture in your house, then you may want to shop at more like of the luxury grow lights market. And with that, we cannot not talk about Soltech Solution, right? So Soltech Solution is this like luxury grow lights company. They have this like, wide range of, beautifully designed grow lights that you can fit in your home that look like a piece of modern furniture, right? So I'm gonna use a Soltech Solution. I think this is a hanging aspect light as an example, right? So I think this light is about $150, and then they have different size. They have like the small size and the medium size. And the medium size, the lumens for that is about 4,000. So remember we talk about lux and lumen, right? So lux essentially is just lumen per square foot, right? We just add the square foot factors in it and it's become lux, right? So let's use the same example. Right, so let's say we want to hang this like really beautifully designed hanging aspect lights over a 5x5 area. Remember, we use it in the early example, 5x5 area, right? So that would be a 25 square feet, right? So because the numbers was given on the label as a lumen, so we had to convert it into lux. So if we add that 25 square meters area, right, as a factors and trying to convert it into lux, you'll get 1,722 lux from that 4,000 lumens. I'm not going to make you do the math. I'm just going to tell you that, yes, I did the math and that is the lux, all right? So just trust me on that. And if I did it wrong, make sure you leave it in a comment below, all right? Because I've been doing too much math. But anyway, so let's say it's 1,722 lux over the 25 square feet area, right? And then we're going to convert it into UMO per square meter per second. Remember, we use the conversion factor 0.0135, right? So we multiply the 1722 lux by 0.0135. We will get approximately 25 UMO per square meter per second. And then when you reference the 24 UMO per square meter per second back to our highlight, low light, medium chart, you'll find out that it's actually low light, right? And it makes sense because I don't think that hanging aspect light is decided for like a big area. I think it's designed more for like, you know, if you have like a jacana or like a ZZ plant at the corner of your house, you want to give it some light, that would be your go-to, right? Because you know, it's obviously just one plant, the area is smaller, and it will be enough lumens or enough PPFD for that particular plant. However, if you're looking to illuminate or like provide light source for like a bigger area, that may not be your choice. So I hope this demonstrates that, you know, yes, there's like different grow lights, they have different lumens, they have different designs. So you really have to think about, you know, all the factors that we talk about, like the area, the distance, how many plants you're covering, you know, the PPFD is just going to be enough to determine which light to get or which plants to put in that particular light. So I also look at the Kelvin for this aspect light is about 3000 K. So remember 3000 K, the lower K, it's basically closer to the red spectrum. It's a warmer color. So that makes a lot of sense because the Soltec solution, like they actually put lots of effort into making it a part of your home instead of this like really outstanding, just stood out really bright white or purple light. So it's designed to be like more like warmer, more like cozy, you know, kind of like part of your home. And that's why they use a lower Kelvin, which gonna give you that like really warm, fuzzy, cozy like color temperature. Okay, enough is enough. There's enough math and conversion and all that stuff, right? So let's just recap what we talked about, right? So today we reviewed how to measure light intensity, aka how strong your light is. It's actually composed of 4 different factors. We talk about PPFD, right? The first factor, which is how dense your light is, right? And then we talk about photoperiod, how long you leave your lights on. We talk about the distance between your lights and your plants. And we also talk about how big of an area your light is actually covering. So this formula that will tell you how intense your light is would apply to grow light as well, right? So we also talk about some terminology such as like, you know, watt, right, which measure energy efficiency. And then we also talk about Kelvin, which is the color temperature of the grow light. The lower the K, like about the 3000 K area, will be warmer color, which will be better for fruiting and flowering for your plants. And on the other hand, like the 5000 to 6400 K, you know, range will be better for vegetative growth for your plants, right? And then from there, we also like do some, we know we did some conversion from lux to PPFD, right? So lux essentially means nothing for the plant. It just measures the brightness of lights to human eyes. But then PPFD actually do mean something for the plants because it's measure how many photons in UMO it's hitting your plants per square meters of area per second over a specific distance, right? So we do the conversion. I try to simplify it as much as possible, and that's why I only give you one conversion factor, which is 0.0135, right? So using that conversion factor, and then you multiply that with the lux, then you'll find out the PPFD. And then from there, we talk about like, what does that PPFD specifically mean? We talk about like low light, right, is 10 to 60. Medium light is 50 to 200. High light is 200 plus. And full sun is about 1000 to 3000 UMO per square meter per second, right? And then next we're gonna, we also did an example on, you know, how the distance and also the area affects the light. So you may get a light that you think it's actually highlights because of the PPFD, But then when you you know, take into the consideration of the distance and also how big of an area you know, the light is covering, then it's become low light. So you also have to bear in mind that. And last but not least, we will a couple grow lights, right? We use those grow lights as an example to like really look at like, you know, or how many UMO we are actually getting and the color temperature, what kind of plants is good, you know, for that particular light, or how many plants we should put in that particular grow light. So yeah, so we talk about all that. I know it's a lot of stuff. I know it's still pretty technical, but you know, I hope you understand that. I truly believe that if you want to become a better plant parent, if we want to become better plant parent, we have to understand the science of, you know, plants and the science of lights. And that's why I spend a lot of time to just, you know, make sure that I understand it, so I can distill the stuff that I understand and then give it to you as simple as possible. So again, if you have any question at all, like, or whatever I don't explain like clear enough, because I know it's very technical, make sure you put it in the comment below. I am happy to answer them. And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you click like. I don't know if you like it a lot because it's a lot of math. So, babe, I don't like math, okay? I do not like math, but I found them extremely helpful and they make sense to me and they make sense to this world. And that's why I do them. All right. And if you want more future video like this, make sure you click subscribe and I will see you next time. Bye.